The fluorescent lights hummed above courtroom 3B like insects trapped in glass. 16-year-old Marcus Chen stood behind the defendant's table, his public defender's hand resting briefly on his shoulder before withdrawing. The gesture felt rehearsed, empty. Judge Harold Brennan shuffled papers on his elevated bench, not looking up. His reading glasses perched on a nose reddened by decades of bourbon and late nights. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday in November, and Marcus could hear the radiator clanking against the far wall, fighting the Chicago cold that seeped through every crack in the old municipal building. "Mr. Chen," Judge Brennan said, finally glancing up with the expression of a man who'd seen this exact scenario 400 times before. "Do you understand the charges against you?" Marcus opened his mouth, but his attorney, Ellen Rodriguez, spoke first. "Your Honor, my client understands the charges of vandalism and trespassing at Lincoln High School. However, we'd like to present mitigating circumstances." "Ms. Rodriguez," the judge interrupted, his voice carrying the bored authority of someone who controlled this small kingdom. "I've read your brief. A troubled home life doesn't excuse destroying school property." He turned back to Marcus. "Young man, you spray-painted obscenities across the principal's office windows. You broke into the building after hours. The school wants restitution. Your principal, Mr. Vance, is here today to give a statement. Do you have anything to say for yourself before I hear from him?" Marcus's throat felt dry. He looked at the empty gallery behind him. His mother was working her second shift at Northwestern Memorial. Couldn't get off. His father hadn't been in the picture since Marcus was 8, somewhere in California with a new family that probably didn't know he existed. The only person sitting in the courtroom was Mr. Vance, the principal, in his navy suit and red power tie, looking like justice personified. "Your Honor," Marcus began, his voice cracking slightly. "I didn't—" "Speak up," Judge Brennan commanded, annoyed. "I didn't just vandalize for no reason," Marcus said. "Louder now." "There's something people need to—" "Stop talking," Judge Brennan cut him off, holding up one hand. There was almost amusement in his eyes now, a kind of theatrical contempt. "Let me guess. Society failed you. The system is rigged. You're actually the victim here." He glanced at the court reporter, a woman in her 50s who hadn't looked up from her stenography machine once. "They all say the same thing. Every single one." A flush of heat crawled up Marcus's neck. Ellen Rodriguez touched his arm gently, warning him to stay calm, but something in the judge's dismissive tone, that casual cruelty of being seen as just another case number, made Marcus's hands curl into fists at his sides. "Permission to approach the bench, Your Honor?" Ellen asked. "Denied. Mr. Vance, please step forward." The judge waved the principal up. Thomas Vance rose with practiced grace. At 52, he'd been principal of Lincoln High for 9 years, transforming it from a struggling inner-city school into what the Chicago Tribune had called a model of urban educational reform. He had the easy confidence of someone who'd given 100 speeches, testified in a dozen cases, knew exactly how to frame a narrative. "Your Honor," Vance began, his voice measured and reasonable, "Marcus Chen has been a student at Lincoln High for 2 years. In that time, he's accumulated 17 disciplinary infractions. He's disrupted classes, shown blatant disrespect to teachers, and now this, breaking into school property and causing over $3,000 in damage. We've tried interventions. We've offered counseling. Some students simply refuse help." Marcus's jaw clenched. 17 infractions. Vance made it sound like proof of character, not context of circumstance. Each one had a story, asking why the school's metal detectors only appeared in the south entrance where Black and Latino kids entered, not the north entrance where the magnet program kids came in, getting sent out of class for questioning why their history textbook spent 3 pages on the civil rights movement but 40 on World War II European theater. Being written up for being late when the CTA Blue Line was delayed, and he'd had to wait 25 minutes in the freezing cold. The message we send to young people matters, Vance continued, turning slightly toward Marcus now, his expression almost paternal in its disappointment. If we excuse this behavior, we're telling every student at Lincoln that actions don't have consequences. That destruction of property is acceptable if you're upset about something. That's not the lesson we should be teaching. Judge Brennan nodded slowly, appreciatively. This was the kind of witness he liked, articulate, professional, making his job easier. And what would you recommend, Mr. Vance? I think Marcus needs accountability, real consequences. I'm recommending he be assigned to juvenile detention for 60 days, followed by 200 hours of community service and full restitution for the damages. Additionally, I'd recommend he be transferred to an alternative school. Lincoln has limited resources, and we need to focus on students who want to be there. The words hung in the air like a verdict already delivered. Alternative school. That's where kids went before they dropped out entirely, before they disappeared into the system's cracks. Marcus knew those statistics. His social studies teacher, Ms. Patel, the one teacher who actually seemed to care, had shown them the numbers. 70% of alternative school students never graduated. Most ended up in the criminal justice system within 5 years. That seems reasonable, Judge Brennan said, making a note. Ms. Rodriguez, does your client wish to make a statement before I render judgment? Ellen looked at Marcus, her expression conflicted. She told him in their 15-minute consultation before the hearing, keep it simple, show remorse, don't make excuses, take the deal they'd been offered, probation, community service, stay enrolled at Lincoln. But Marcus could see in her eyes, she knew that deal was off the table now. Vance had escalated. This was about to become permanent record, juvenile detention, alternative school, the beginning of the end. Marcus stood. His hands were shaking slightly, but his voice came out steady. Your Honor, can I ask Mr. Vance a question? Judge Brennan's eyebrows rose. This isn't a cross-examination, son. You're not a lawyer. I know. But if I'm going to be judged for what I did, shouldn't I be able to explain why I did it? I think we've heard enough why, the judge said dryly. Troubled home, unfair world, teenage angst, I get it. With respect, Your Honor, you don't. Marcus's voice was louder now, clearer. Ellen was pulling at his sleeve, trying to get him to sit down, but he stayed standing. You haven't heard anything yet. You've just decided what kind of kid I am because I'm standing here. Mr. Chen, I'm warning you. Mr. Vance, Marcus said, turning to face the principal directly, ignoring the judge's rising irritation. Why don't you tell the court what I spray-painted on your office window? Vance's expression flickered, just for a second, a micro-expression of something that might have been discomfort, profanity, obscenities. The exact words are in the police report. Say them, Marcus pressed. Tell the judge exactly what I wrote. Marcus, sit down, Ellen hissed, but there was something in her tone now, a question like maybe she was wondering what he was getting at. Mr. Chen, you're testing my patience, Judge Brennan warned. Sit down now, or I'll hold you in contempt. Why won't he say it? Marcus demanded, his voice rising. Why won't Mr. Vance tell you what I actually wrote? Because it wasn't obscenities, it wasn't random vandalism. He pulled something from his pocket, a folded piece of paper, and held it up. I have proof. I have documentation of everything. But nobody wanted to hear it. Not the police, not my lawyer, not anyone. Everyone just decided I was another troubled kid destroying property. The courtroom went very quiet. Even the radiator seemed to stop clanking. Judge Brennan leaned forward slightly, his expression changing from irritation to something closer to curiosity. What did you write, Mr. Chen? Marcus unfolded the paper, a photograph he'd printed at the library that morning, spending his last $2 on printing costs. I wrote names, Your Honor, 7 names. Students who reported sexual assault by the assistant football coach over the past 3 years. Students whose reports were filed and then buried. Students who were told to keep quiet because it would hurt the school's reputation, hurt the football program's funding, hurt Lincoln's chance at the state championship. The air in the courtroom shifted. Mr. Vance's face had gone pale. "I wrote their names on his window," Marcus continued, his voice steady now, "because Mr. Vance's office overlooks the football field. Because every day those girls have to walk past that field and see the place where it happened. Because one of those names is my friend Jasmine Howard, who tried to tell the truth and got called a liar. Because another one is my friend Tyler Mendez, who's a boy, and everyone told him boys don't get assaulted by men, so he must be making it up for attention." Judge Brennan had gone very still. "Ms. Rodriguez, did you know about this?" Ellen shook her head slowly, staring at Marcus with a mixture of shock and realization. "No, Your Honor, he didn't tell me." "I tried," Marcus said quietly. "I tried to tell the police when they arrested me. They said I was making excuses. I tried to tell you, Ms. Rodriguez, but you said the only thing that mattered was getting the best deal, not making things worse by bringing up other issues. Everyone keeps saying, 'Stop talking.' But maybe someone should have listened." Judge Brennan removed his reading glasses, setting them down carefully on his bench. His face had changed entirely, the boredom gone, replaced by something harder, more alert. "Mr. Vance, is this true?" The principal's mouth opened, closed. "Your Honor, This is a serious accusation. Without evidence—" "I have evidence," Marcus interrupted. He held up a flash drive now, pulling it from his other pocket. "Emails, documentation, recorded conversations, everything. I'm 16 years old, and I did what the school administration should have done. I investigated, I collected testimony, I built a case, and when nobody would listen, when they kept protecting the football program over the students, I made sure those names would be seen. I made sure someone would finally have to pay attention." The silence that followed was absolute. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed. A phone rang in a distant office, but in courtroom 3B no one moved. Judge Brennan's voice, when he spoke, was completely different from before, stripped of theatricality, cold and precise. "Bailiff, I want that flash drive entered as evidence. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm calling a recess. We're not proceeding until I've reviewed these materials and heard from any witnesses, Mr. Chen wishes to call. Mr. Vance, you're to remain in this courthouse." He looked at Marcus for a long moment, and something in his eyes might have been respect or regret or both. "Young man, why didn't you lead with this?" Marcus felt his hands still shaking, but now it was adrenaline, release, the weight of months lifting. "Would you have believed me? A troubled kid with 17 infractions making accusations against a principal who's won awards for educational excellence? Or would you have told me to stop talking?" The judge had no answer for that. None of them did. The recess lasted 43 minutes, but to Marcus, waiting in the small conference room adjacent to the courtroom, it felt like hours. Ellen Rodriguez sat across from him at the metal table, her laptop open, reviewing the files from his flash drive, with an expression that cycled between disbelief, anger, and something that looked like guilt. "Marcus," she said finally, not looking up from the screen, do you understand what you have here? These emails between Vance and the athletic director, this recorded conversation with the school counselor. If this is authentic—" "It's authentic," Marcus said flatly. He was exhausted suddenly, the adrenaline crash hitting him like a physical weight. He'd been carrying this for 6 months, ever since Jasmine had broken down crying in the library during lunch period, telling him what happened in the equipment room after a practice. Since then, he'd become something he'd never intended to be, an investigator, a documenter of other people's trauma. "How did you get all this?" Ellen asked, finally meeting his eyes. "Some of these are internal school communications, password-protected files." "Does it matter?" Marcus replied. "Is it less true because I wasn't supposed to see it?" She studied him for a moment, and he could see her legal mind working through implications, admissibility, chain of custody, all the technical barriers that could make truth irrelevant in a courtroom. "It matters for how we proceed. But Marcus, why didn't you go to the police with this? Why vandalism? Why risk your entire future?" He laughed, a bitter sound. "I did go to the police. I went to Officer Daniels, the school resource officer. He told me to take it to the principal. I told him Vance was part of the problem. He said I was being disrespectful, and if I kept making accusations without proof, I could be charged with slander." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, realizing it was shaking. "Everyone kept telling me to follow the proper channels, but the proper channels are designed to protect the institution, not the kids." Before Ellen could respond, there was a knock on the door. The bailiff, a stocky woman in her 40s named Garcia, stuck her head in. "Judge wants to see you both. Conference in his chambers." They followed her down a narrow hallway. Institutional beige walls covered with framed photographs of past judges and civic leaders. Rows of mostly white faces staring out with expressions of stern authority. Judge Brennan's chambers were surprisingly modest. A desk buried under case files, bookshelves lined with legal volumes, a small window overlooking the parking lot where dirty snow was piled in grey mounds. Brennan was standing when they entered, tie loosened, jacket off. He looked older than he had on the bench, more tired. Mr. Vance sat in one of the chairs facing the desk, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. A woman Marcus didn't recognize sat in the other chair, late 30s, severe black suit, briefcase open on her lap. She had the predatory alertness of a prosecutor who smelled blood. "Ms. Rodriguez, Mr. Chen, this is Assistant State's Attorney Catherine Pierce," Brennan said, gesturing. "She's from the Criminal Investigations Division. Given the nature of the allegations in Mr. Chen's evidence, I felt it was necessary to involve her office immediately." Pierce stood, extending a hand to Ellen, but barely glancing at Marcus. "I've reviewed the files. Preliminary assessment. There's enough here to open an investigation into the handling of assault allegations at Lincoln High. The emails alone suggest a pattern of suppression." She turned to Vance, her expression neutral, but her tone cutting. "Mr. Vance, I strongly suggest you retain legal counsel before answering any questions." Vance's face had taken on a greyish quality. "This is a misunderstanding. The allegations those students made were investigated through proper channels. The coach in question, David Riley, was interviewed, and nothing substantiated." "According to your own emails," Pierce interrupted, her voice cold. "You told the athletic director, and I quote, 'We can't afford another scandal right now. Football is the only thing keeping enrollment numbers up in this district. Handle it quietly.' That doesn't sound like a proper investigation to me. That sounds like a cover-up." "Out of context," Vance said quickly, desperately. "I was referring to the rumor mill, the way these things can spiral." 7 separate students," Pierce continued, "over a span of 3 years. 7 different incidents, all involving the same individual, all reported to school administration. And in each case, no action taken beyond verbal warnings to Coach Riley. The last victim was assaulted 6 weeks ago. That's ongoing criminal activity that you had knowledge of and failed to report to law enforcement." The room seemed to shrink. Marcus found himself studying Vance's face, watching the careful mask of principled educator crumble. He'd spent months hating this man, imagining this moment of exposure, but now that it was happening, he felt strangely empty. There was no satisfaction in watching someone realize their entire career, their entire self-image, was about to collapse. "Marcus," Judge Brennan said, turning to face him directly. "I owe you an apology. When you came into my courtroom, I saw what I expected to see. Another kid making excuses. I didn't listen. That's my failure." The words landed unexpectedly. Marcus had been braced for skepticism, for more interrogation, not for this. "Your Honor—" "Let me finish," Brennan said, holding up a hand, but gently this time. "You did something remarkable. You saw injustice, and when the systems that should have addressed it failed, you took action. Was spray painting property the best choice? No, but you're 16 years old, and you did more actual investigation than the adults whose job it was to protect those students." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "However, we still have to address the legal question of the vandalism charge." Ellen straightened. "Your Honor, given the circumstances—" "I'm not dismissing the charge," Brennan interrupted, but his tone was measured, thinking through something. "But I'm not going to rule today. Instead, I'm ordering a full investigation into these allegations. Mr. Vance, you're suspended from your position pending the outcome of that investigation. Ms. Pierce, your office has jurisdiction. And Marcus, you're released on your own recognizance. We'll reconvene in 30 days to address the vandalism charge after we understand the full context of what happened at Lincoln High." "Your Honor," Vance said, his voice cracking now, desperate, "this is going to destroy my reputation. 23 years in education. I've dedicated my life." "7 kids," Pierce said quietly, almost conversationally. 7 children who trusted the system to protect them, and you chose a football program instead." She closed her briefcase with a sharp click. "Mr. Vance, you should leave now and call a lawyer. Anything else you say could and will be used against you." After the meeting, Ellen walked Marcus out to the courthouse steps. It was almost 5 o'clock, already dark, the temperature dropping into the teens. Chicago in November felt like punishment, wind cutting through his thin jacket. His mother would be off shift soon. He should call her, but he didn't know what to say. How do you explain that you've just upended your entire school, exposed a cover-up, possibly destroyed a man's career, all because you couldn't stand to see your friends hurting? "You need to understand something," Ellen said, pulling her own coat tighter against the wind. "What happens now isn't going to be simple. This investigation will be public. Those students you're trying to protect, their names are going to come out. There will be media attention, lawyers, people trying to discredit them and you. Some people at your school will call you a hero. Others will hate you for destroying the football season, for bringing negative attention to Lincoln. This is going to get much harder before it gets better." Marcus nodded slowly. He'd thought about this late at night, imagining different scenarios. "I know. And the vandalism charge, even with context, even with good intentions, you still broke the law. Judge Brennan is sympathetic, but he has to balance that sympathy with legal precedent. You might still face consequences." "I know that too." Ellen studied him for a long moment, and he could see her reassessing him, trying to figure out who this kid really was. "Why did you really do it, Marcus? And don't tell me it was just about your friends. There's something else." He thought about how to answer that, how to explain the feeling that had been building in him since middle school, watching the way rules applied differently depending on who you were, who your parents were, what your last name was. Watching the way adults talked about justice and fairness while creating systems that protected power. "My dad left when I was 8, Marcus said finally. "Before he did, he got accused of stealing at the warehouse where he worked. He didn't do it, I know he didn't, but his supervisor didn't like him, said he was too argumentative, always questioning safety violations. So when money went missing, they blamed him. He tried to prove his innocence, but they'd already decided. He lost his job, couldn't find another one, started drinking, eventually just left. He shoved his hands deeper into his pockets. I learned early that the truth doesn't matter if no one's willing to hear it. So when Jasmine told me what happened, when I saw the school bearing it, I knew if I played by their rules, nothing would change. Sometimes you have to make people listen. Ellen was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a business card, writing something on the back. This is my personal number. When things get complicated, and they will, call me. Not as your public defender, as someone who thinks you're doing something important. She handed him the card. But Marcus, promise me something. Promise me you'll be careful. People don't like being exposed. Vance has friends, connections. The school board will want to minimize damage. There will be pressure to make this go away, to paint you as the problem rather than the symptom. I can handle it, Marcus said, but even as he said it, he wondered if that was true. Maybe, Ellen said, but you shouldn't have to. You're 16. She checked her phone, frowned at the time. I have another client to meet, but stay in touch. And Marcus, what you did in that courtroom today, standing up to the judge, refusing to be dismissed, that took courage. Don't lose that. She walked away, disappearing into the flow of people leaving the courthouse, and Marcus stood alone on the steps, watching the traffic move past on California Avenue. Somewhere in this city, his mother was wrapping up her shift, checking supplies, saying goodbye to patients. Somewhere, Jasmine and Tyler and the 5 other names he'd spray-painted on that window were living their lives, maybe watching TV, maybe doing homework, maybe lying awake at night, replaying memories they couldn't escape. Somewhere, David Riley, the coach who'd hurt them, was probably coaching practice right now, unaware that his world was about to implode. Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling to Jasmine's number. She didn't know yet what he'd done, didn't know that her name was about to become part of a public investigation. He owed her a warning, a chance to prepare. But as he stared at her contact information, his thumb hovering over the call button, he realized he had no idea what to say. The first message arrived while he was still standing there. Unknown number. You just destroyed a lot of people's lives, you little punk. Hope you're proud of yourself. Then another. Lincoln football is over because of you. Thanks for ruining everything. And another. We know where you live. His hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't adrenaline. It was fear, real and immediate. Ellen had been right. This was just beginning. He turned off his phone and started walking toward the Blue Line station, collar up against the wind, trying to ignore the feeling that everything he'd just set in motion was accelerating beyond his control, like standing on railroad tracks and watching a train approach, too late to step away. By Monday morning, the story was everywhere. Marcus learned this before he'd even gotten out of bed, his mother's voice filtering through the thin apartment walls. Turn on Channel 7. No, now. Marcus is... They're talking about Lincoln High. He sat up, heart pounding, reached for his phone. 63 messages, 47 missed calls. His social media accounts were exploding, direct messages from strangers, comments on photos from 2 years ago, people he'd never met calling him hero, traitor, liar, brave. The local news had picked up the story overnight. Student exposes alleged sexual assault cover-up at Chicago High School. His mother appeared in his doorway, still in her scrubs from the night shift, eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion and worry. Linda Chen was 41 but looked older. The cost of single-income parenting and double shifts written into the lines around her mouth. Marcus, what did you do? Mom, I'm getting calls from reporters, the school administration, parents I've never met. Our landlord called, asking if we're involved in legal trouble. What did you do? He got out of bed, moving carefully, like approaching something dangerous. I did what was right. Right. Her voice cracked somewhere between anger and desperation. Right is keeping your head down. Right is graduating high school. Right is not making yourself a target. Do you know what this means? Do you have any idea what you've done to us?" "Us?" Marcus felt his own anger rising now. "I didn't do anything to us. I tried to help kids who were—" "By vandalizing school property, by getting yourself arrested, by putting us in the news." She was crying now, wiping at her eyes roughly. "I work 2 jobs, Marcus. 2 jobs to keep us in this apartment, to keep food on the table, to make sure you have a chance at college, at a future. And now you've thrown it all away for what? To be some kind of hero." "They were hurting kids, Mom. The school knew, and they did nothing. Then you tell someone. You tell police. You tell—" "I did tell people," Marcus shouted, his voice louder than he'd intended. "Everyone told me to shut up. Everyone told me I didn't understand, that I should mind my own business, that I was making trouble. So, yeah, I made trouble, because making trouble was the only way anyone would listen." They stared at each other across the small bedroom. Years of unspoken tension suddenly visible. His mother worked herself to exhaustion to provide stability, and he'd chosen chaos. She'd sacrificed everything for the promise of his normal future, and he'd detonated it. "You're not going to school today," she said finally, her voice flat. "Not until I figure out if it's safe. Mom, I can't just hide. Watch me make you." She pulled his door closed, and he heard her footsteps retreating, heard the TV volume increase in the living room. Local news anchor voice. Allegations that school administrators at Lincoln High knowingly suppressed reports of sexual assault involving a member of the coaching staff. The superintendent's office has released a statement saying they take these accusations seriously and have launched an independent investigation. Marcus sat on his bed, phone still buzzing with incoming messages, and felt the weight of isolation settle over him like a physical presence. He'd imagined this moment would feel different, righteous, maybe, or validated. Instead, he just felt alone. By Tuesday, he was back at school. His mother had argued against it, but they couldn't afford for her to miss work to stay home with him, and he'd convinced her that hiding would make things worse. "I didn't do anything wrong," he'd insisted. "If I hide, it looks like I'm ashamed. I'm not ashamed." Walking through Lincoln High's main entrance felt like entering hostile territory. The metal detectors beeped as he passed through. South entrance, always the south entrance for kids from his neighborhood. And the security guard, Mr. Patterson, gave him a long look but said nothing. The hallway noise changed as he moved through it, conversations dropping to whispers, heads turning to track his movement. He'd been invisible for 2 years at Lincoln. Now he was a spectacle. His locker was vandalized. Someone had written "snitch" in permanent marker across the blue paint, along with cruder insults. A few feet away, a group of football players stood clustered. Marcus recognized them. Jake Morrison, the quarterback, Devon Wells, star linebacker, Travis Chen, no relation, who played defensive end. They watched him approach with expressions ranging from contempt to open hostility. "Hey, Marcus!" Jake called out, his voice carrying down the hallway. "Congrats on killing the season. We were 8-2, headed to state playoffs. Now Coach Riley's on administrative leave, half the team's benched pending investigation, and we had to forfeit our last 3 games. Hope it was worth it." Marcus kept his face neutral, tried to project confidence he didn't feel. "Coach Riley assaulted 7 students. That's worth more than football." "You mean 7 students made accusations?" Devon corrected, stepping forward slightly, using his size to intimidate. "Innocent until proven guilty, remember? But hey, you already decided he's guilty, and now everyone's career is over, mine included. I had scouts looking at me, full-ride scholarship to Northwestern. That's done now. Coaches don't touch kids from scandal schools." "That's not my fault," Marcus said, but even to his own ears it sounded weak. "Sure it is," Travis said quietly. He was the only one who didn't look angry, just sad. "You could have handled this quietly, gone through proper channels. Instead, you made it public, made us all look bad. You think Northwestern, Michigan, Ohio State want players from a school known for covering up assault? You didn't just hurt Riley, you hurt all of us. Marcus wanted to argue, to explain that going through proper channels had failed, that quiet handling was exactly what had allowed this to continue, but the hallway had filled with students now, all watching, and he could see the way opinion was splitting. Some kids, mostly girls, mostly students of color, looked at him with something like respect, but others, especially the athletes and the magnet program kids whose college applications listed Lincoln High football volunteer or athletic booster club member, looked at him like he'd personally destroyed their futures. "Walk away," a voice said from behind him. Marcus turned to see Ms. Patel, his social studies teacher, a slight woman in her 30s who commanded respect through intelligence rather than authority. "Marcus, come with me. The rest of you, get to class before you're late." She escorted him to her classroom, closed the door, and gestured to a desk. "Sit." He sat. "I read about what happened," she said, leaning against her own desk, arms crossed. "I had no idea you'd collected that evidence. No idea you were carrying this." "I tried to tell—" "I know," she interrupted. "I've been thinking about that. About how many times students tried to tell me things and I dismissed them because I was busy or stressed or because it seemed too complicated to get involved. I'm sorry, Marcus. I should have been paying better attention." The apology caught him off guard. Adults didn't usually admit failure, especially not to students. "It's not your fault. Maybe not. But it's not my fault either." She studied him for a moment. "You're going to have a rough few weeks, months probably. Some staff members are angry you made the school look bad. Some students think you're a hero. Others think you're destroying Lincoln's reputation. The truth is, probably somewhere in the middle. You did something brave and necessary that's also going to hurt a lot of innocent people in the process. That's the complicated nature of truth-telling in broken systems." "So what do I do?" Marcus asked, hearing the exhaustion in his own voice. "Survive," she said simply. "Keep your head down, do your work, don't engage with provocations. And Marcus, find the people who support what you did. You're going to need them." He found them at lunch. Jasmine Howard was sitting alone in the cafeteria's far corner, picking at a salad, her long braids pulled back in a ponytail. When she saw Marcus approach, her expression was unreadable, not quite angry, not quite grateful, something more complicated. "Can I sit?" he asked. She gestured to the empty chair across from her, and he sat down, suddenly uncertain how to start this conversation. In his mind, he'd imagined she'd be relieved, grateful even, that someone had finally fought for her. But the reality was more complex than his imagination. "You put my name on a window," Jasmine said finally, her voice low and controlled. "My actual name, where everyone could see it. I was trying to make sure people knew—" "That I was assaulted?" she interrupted, meeting his eyes now, and he could see the hurt there, layered under anger. "That's my story, Marcus. My trauma. Mine. And you took it and made it public without asking me, without giving me any choice." The words hit him like a physical blow. "Jasmine, I was trying to help." I know you were," she said, and her voice softened slightly. "I know your intentions were good, but good intentions don't make it okay to decide for me when and how my assault becomes public knowledge. You know what the last 2 days have been like? Reporters calling my house, kids at school either avoiding me like I'm contaminated or asking me for details like it's gossip. My parents are devastated. My little sister heard about it from her friends at middle school. Do you understand what you took from me? I wanted to be the one to decide when I was ready to come forward." Marcus felt something crumbling inside him, the righteous certainty he'd been clinging to dissolving. "I'm sorry. God, Jasmine, I'm so sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing." Maybe you were," she said quietly. Maybe this is the only way anything changes, but that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. She pushed her salad away, having eaten maybe 3 bites. I talked to Tyler last night. He feels the same way. Grateful but violated, you know. Like we're grateful someone finally believed us enough to take action, but we didn't ask for this. We didn't ask to become the face of sexual assault at Lincoln High. They sat in silence for a moment, and Marcus became aware of the cafeteria noise around them. Laughter, conversations, the clatter of trays, normal teenage life proceeding, while their small corner felt apocalyptic. "So what do we do now?" Marcus asked finally. Jasmine looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe understanding. "We survive it. Together. Because like it or not, we're in this now. The investigation is happening. People are taking sides. And those of us who got hurt, we don't get to pretend it didn't happen anymore, so we might as well make sure our truth actually matters." She stood up, gathering her things, and paused before leaving. "Marcus, thank you. Even though I'm angry, even though this is complicated, thank you for believing us when no one else would. That matters. Just, next time you want to save someone, ask them first if they want to be saved." She walked away, and Marcus sat alone at the table, surrounded by the noise of normal life, feeling the full weight of what he'd set in motion. He'd thought this was about good versus evil, truth versus lies, but Jasmine was right. It was messier than that. He'd taken people's pain and made it public spectacle. He'd tried to help and caused new wounds in the process. His phone buzzed. Text from Tyler Mendez. "We need to talk, all of us, the 7 of us. Can you meet tonight?" Marcus stared at the message, understanding that this was about to become something bigger than his individual action, that the survivors were taking ownership of their own story now. He texted back, "Yes, where?" The response came quickly. "Your move started this. Time for us to finish it. Together." And for the first time since Judge Brennan's courtroom, Marcus felt something like hope mixed with his fear. Maybe he'd made mistakes, maybe his methods were flawed, but the truth was out now, and it wasn't his alone to carry anymore. The meeting took place at the public library, main branch on Roosevelt Road, in a small study room Tyler had reserved under a fake name. All 7 survivors showed up, along with Marcus, crammed into a space designed for 4 people maximum. The age range surprised him. The youngest was a freshman named Sarah Kim, barely 15, and the oldest was a senior named Isaiah Thompson, who'd graduated the previous year but came back when he heard about the investigation. Tyler took the lead, which made sense. At 17, he was articulate, already involved in student government, the kind of kid who'd probably end up in politics or law. "First thing," he said, looking around the room, "we need to get on the same page. Marcus's action brought this public. We can't undo that. The question now is how we control the narrative going forward." "Control it," Jasmine said skeptically. "Tyler, the reporters are already spinning this however they want. Half the coverage makes it sound like we're ruining an innocent man's life. The other half makes us sound like victims too fragile to function. We don't control anything." "We control our stories," Isaiah countered. He was tall, broad-shouldered, had the bearing of someone older than his 19 years. "Right now, other people are telling our stories for us. Vance is telling his version. The school board is telling theirs. Even Marcus, no offense, told his version when he put our names on that window. But we haven't told ours yet, not directly." Sarah spoke up for the first time, her voice quiet but steady. "What do you mean, tell our story?" "I mean we go public, on our terms. We sit for interviews, we write statements, we make it clear what actually happened and how the school failed us. We take control before someone else does. The room erupted in overlapping voices, some agreeing, some terrified, all of them processing years of trauma suddenly thrust into public view. Marcus stayed quiet, aware that this wasn't his space to dominate, that he'd already made too many decisions on their behalf. "Wait, everyone stop," said Rachel Morrison, a junior who Marcus barely knew. She was small, soft-spoken, the kind of student who disappeared in crowds. "Before we decide anything, I need to know, are we sure? Are we absolutely sure we want to do this? Because once we attach our faces and voices to this story, we can't take it back. Our college applications, our job searches, everything. Lincoln High sexual assault victim will be the first thing people find when they Google us. Forever." The silence that followed was heavy, with the weight of permanent consequences. These weren't abstract victims in a news story anymore. These were real teenagers weighing the cost of truth against the cost of silence. "I already know what silence costs," Jasmine said finally. "It cost me 2 years of therapy. It cost me feeling safe in my own school. It cost me believing adults would protect kids. At least if we speak up, if we tell the truth, maybe something changes. Maybe the next student who gets assaulted won't get buried." "Or maybe nothing changes," Sarah said, wiping at her eyes. "Maybe we destroy our own lives for nothing." Tyler looked at Marcus then, directly. "You started this. What do you think we should do?" The question felt like a test, and maybe like a trap. Marcus considered his words carefully. "I think it's not my decision. I already made one choice for all of you without asking, and Jasmine's right. I didn't have that right. This has to be your choice, all of you, and whatever you decide, I'll support it." "Easy to say when you're not the one who has to attach your assault to your identity for the rest of your life," Rachel said, not unkindly, but truthfully. "You're right," Marcus acknowledged. "I can't understand what you're going through, but I can tell you what I've learned the last few days. Silence protects the powerful. Truth is messy and painful and complicated, but it's the only tool that forces change. And yeah, maybe this ruins Riley's career and Vance's reputation and the football season. But you know what? That's not your fault. That's theirs. They chose to hurt kids. They chose to cover it up. You're just refusing to pretend it didn't happen." Isaiah was nodding. "He's right. Look, I'm already in college. This doesn't affect my applications anymore. I can take the heat. But for you all, the younger ones, this is different. I think we should vote. Everyone decides for themselves if they're willing to go public. No judgment either way. And those of us who are willing, we become the face of this. We protect those who aren't ready." They voted by secret ballot, using torn pieces of notebook paper. Tyler counted 5 yes, 2 no. The 2 who voted no, Sarah and Rachel, looked relieved when they learned they were in the minority, but wouldn't be forced to participate. "Okay," Tyler said, organizing the papers. 5 of us. That's enough for a press conference, a statement, something that puts our voices first. Isaiah, you're graduated. Can you reach out to that lawyer your family knows? The one who does civil rights work? Already did, Isaiah said. She's willing to represent us pro bono, says this is exactly the kind of case she wants to take on. Over the next 2 hours, they planned. Who would speak, what they would say, how they would protect the 2 who weren't ready to be public, how they would present not just as victims, but as advocates for systemic change. Marcus mostly listened, occasionally contributing ideas, but understanding that this phase belonged to them, not him. Near the end, Tyler turned to him again. "Marcus, you're going to be part of this, right? At the press conference? You started this investigation. You should be there when we finish it." Marcus hesitated. "I don't want to make this about me. This is your story. It's all of our story now," Jasmine said, and there was something in her voice, not quite forgiveness, but maybe acceptance. "You can't start a revolution and then step back when it gets real. We need you there, but not as a hero, as a witness, as someone who saw something wrong and couldn't stay quiet. That's important too. He nodded slowly. Okay, I'll be there. And the press conference happened 4 days later, on a Friday afternoon, in a community center 3 blocks from Lincoln High. The location was deliberate, close enough to feel connected to the school, far enough to not be on school property. The lawyer Isaiah knew a woman named Deborah Chen, no relation to Marcus, though reporters would make much of the shared last name, had handled all the logistics, media notifications, prepared statements, legal protections. Marcus stood off to the side of the small stage, watching the room fill with reporters, cameras, community members. His mother had taken the afternoon off, an impossibility that required calling in a favor, trading a future shift, and sat in the back row looking terrified but present. Ellen Rodriguez was there, his public defender, sitting with Catherine Pierce, the prosecutor. Even Judge Brennan had come, though he stayed near the exit, observing rather than participating. Tyler spoke first, reading from a prepared statement that began, "We are not victims, we are survivors, and we are here to take control of our own story." One by one, they told their experiences. Not the graphic details. Deborah had advised them to keep it factual but not traumatic, to maintain dignity while conveying reality. They spoke about reporting to counselors, to teachers, to administrators. They spoke about being dismissed, being told to keep quiet, being made to feel like they were the problem rather than the violence inflicted on them. Isaiah's testimony was particularly powerful. He described being a senior, captain of the debate team, accepted to 3 prestigious universities, and how the assault had derailed everything. "I didn't report it at first," he said, his voice steady despite the visible emotion, "because I thought no one would believe that a male athlete could be assaulted by a male coach. When I finally did tell the school counselor, she suggested I might be confused about my sexuality, that maybe I'd misinterpreted normal coaching behavior. That was 2 years ago. I've spent those 2 years in therapy, learning to trust adults again. And now I learn that 6 other students reported similar experiences, and nothing changed. How many more would there have been if someone hadn't forced everyone to pay attention?" When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he kept it brief. "I'm not here as a hero. I'm here because I failed to find any other way to make people listen. I broke the law by vandalizing school property. I understand there are consequences for that, and I accept them. But I'd do it again, because sometimes the law fails to protect the people it's supposed to serve. Sometimes you have to choose between following rules and doing what's right. I chose right." The question period was aggressive. Reporters wanted details, wanted drama, wanted the sound bites that would trend on social media. One reporter from a conservative news outlet asked pointedly, "Isn't it true that false assault allegations have destroyed innocent people's careers? How do we know these accusations are credible?" Deborah fielded that one. "These allegations have been corroborated through multiple witnesses, documentary evidence, and a pattern of behavior spanning 3 years. This isn't about he said, she said. This is about an institution that prioritized its reputation over the safety of children. And to suggest that survivors should prove their trauma to your satisfaction before deserving belief, that's exactly the attitude that allows predators to operate with impunity." Another reporter asked the survivors how they felt about Marcus's actions. Tyler took that one. "Marcus's methods were imperfect. He made decisions that affected us without our consent, but his intentions were pure, and his actions got results that years of proper channels didn't achieve. Would we have preferred to control our own timeline? Yes. But we're not angry at Marcus. We're angry at a system that made Marcus's extreme action necessary in the first place." The fallout was immediate and intense. By Saturday morning, the story had national coverage. The Lincoln High truth was trending. Think pieces appeared in major newspapers debating school accountability, mandatory reporting laws, the ethics of whistleblowing. Some praised Marcus as a hero, others criticized him for vigilante justice. Everyone had an opinion. Lincoln High's school board held an emergency meeting Sunday evening. Marcus watched the live stream from his apartment, his mother beside him on the couch, both of them eating take-out Chinese food because neither had the energy to cook. The board voted unanimously to terminate Mr. Vance's employment, to place Coach Riley on permanent unpaid leave pending criminal investigation, and to implement mandatory assault prevention training for all staff and students. "It's not enough," his mother said quietly, watching the screen. "It's a start," Marcus replied. She turned to look at him then, really look at him, and he saw something in her expression he'd never seen before. Not pride exactly, but recognition. "You're not a child anymore," she said. "I keep trying to protect you like you're still 8 years old, still my little boy. But you're not. You made an adult choice, with adult consequences, and you're handling it better than I would have." "Mom!" "Let me finish." She set down her food, took his hand. "I was angry because I was scared. Scared you destroyed your future. Scared we'd lose our home. Scared of all the things that can go wrong when you challenge powerful people. But I've been watching you this week, and I realize you already knew all that. You knew the risks and did it anyway because you couldn't live with staying silent. That takes courage I don't think I have. So I'm sorry I yelled at you. I'm sorry I wasn't more supportive when you needed it. And I'm proud of you, even if I'm still terrified." Marcus felt something crack open in his chest, all the fear and isolation of the past week suddenly finding release. "I don't know if I did the right thing. Jasmine's still angry with me. Rachel and Sarah are traumatized all over again. The football players' scholarships are at risk. Maybe I just made everything worse." "Or maybe," his mother said gently, "you made everything different. Not better, not worse, just different. And different was necessary because the old way was protecting predators." She squeezed his hand. "Change is messy, baby. It hurts people, even when it's necessary. That doesn't mean it's wrong, it just means it's complicated." On Monday, Marcus returned to Judge Brennan's courtroom for the continued hearing on his vandalism charge. The gallery was packed this time. Reporters, community activists, some of the survivors from the press conference, students from Lincoln High, both supporting and opposing him. Ellen Rodriguez sat beside him at the defense table, and he could feel the weight of all those watching eyes. Judge Brennan entered, and the bailiff called the room to order. The judge looked older than the last time Marcus had seen him, the events of the past 2 weeks seeming to have aged him. He settled into his chair, reviewed some papers, then looked directly at Marcus. "Mr. Chen," he began, "I've spent considerable time reviewing this case, the evidence you presented, and the subsequent investigation. I've consulted with colleagues, reviewed precedent, and struggled with a question that doesn't have easy answers. How do we balance the rule of law with moral necessity?" The courtroom was absolutely silent. Marcus held his breath. "You committed vandalism," Brennan continued. "That is a fact. You broke into school property after hours and defaced it. Under normal circumstances, that would result in a clear finding of guilt, possibly juvenile detention, certainly a permanent record that would follow you for years. However, these are not normal circumstances." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "What you did was illegal, but it was also necessary. You attempted to work within the system. You reported to authorities. You followed what should have been proper channels. When those channels failed, when adults whose job it was to protect children instead protected an institution, you took action that forced accountability. Was it the best action? Perhaps not. But it was effective action, and that effectiveness has resulted in systemic changes that will protect future students." Brennan removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I'm not going to dismiss the charges. That would set a precedent, I'm not comfortable with. That breaking the law is acceptable if your cause is just. History is filled with atrocities committed by people who believed their cause was just. But I am going to take the extraordinary step of sentencing you to time served, the 2 days you spent in custody after your arrest, plus 100 hours of community service to be served at organizations that support survivors of sexual assault. Additionally, I'm sealing your juvenile record. When you turn 18, this conviction will be expunged entirely. Marcus felt Ellen grip his arm, relief evident in her touch. In the gallery, someone started clapping, then others joined, until the judge had to bang his gavel. "Order," Brennan said firmly. "I'm not finished." He looked at Marcus again, his expression serious. "Mr. Chen, I'm giving you leniency not because what you did was right, but because you're 16 years old and you did something imperfect in response to a massive institutional failure. But understand this. The law is not your first resort. It should not be your method of enacting change, except in extreme circumstances where all other options have been exhausted. You got lucky. The evidence you gathered was credible, the cause was just, and you had the support of people who could help contextualize your actions. That won't always be the case, so my advice to you is this. Channel this passion, this unwillingness to accept injustice into legal advocacy. Become a lawyer. Become a journalist. Become someone who can fight these battles within the system rather than outside it. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice steady. "I understand." "Good." Brennan shuffled his papers. "This case is closed. Mr. Chen, you're free to go." 2 months later, Marcus stood in front of Lincoln High's main entrance, staring up at the building that had been the center of his entire world for 2 years. It was early March now, the weather finally starting to break, temperatures climbing into the 40s, dirty snow melting into grey slush. Spring semester was halfway done. Coach Riley had been arrested and was awaiting trial. Mr. Vance had been fired and was facing potential criminal charges for failure to report. The school had a new interim principal, a woman named Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, who'd immediately implemented new reporting protocols and hired a full-time sexual assault counselor. The changes were real. They mattered, but they couldn't undo what had happened. Tyler had been accepted to Georgetown with a full scholarship, planning to study political science and law. Isaiah was thriving at University of Illinois, had started a campus organization for male sexual assault survivors. Jasmine was still at Lincoln, still processing, still angry sometimes, but also healing. The other survivors were finding their own paths forward. And Marcus? He'd been accepted to Northwestern's early admission program, planning to study investigative journalism with a minor in legal studies. His essay had been about the past 6 months, about learning the difference between justice and revenge, about the cost of truth-telling, about accepting that doing the right thing doesn't always feel good and doesn't always end cleanly. "You coming in, or just gonna stand there?" a voice asked. Marcus turned to see Ms. Patel carrying her usual oversized bag stuffed with papers and books. "Just thinking," he said, about how much has changed and how much hasn't." She nodded, understanding. "Change is slow, but it's also cumulative. What you did, what all of you did, that's going to ripple outward for years. Students who see that speaking up can matter, even when it's hard. Administrators who understand they'll be held accountable. That matters, Marcus. Even when it doesn't feel like enough, it matters." They walked in together through the metal detectors into the familiar chaos of hallway noise and locker slams and teenage drama. Some kids still avoided him, some nodded respectfully. Most just treated him like any other student, which was its own kind of victory. In social studies class, Ms. Patel was teaching about civil disobedience, Rosa Parks, the Greensboro sit-ins, the March on Washington. She looked at Marcus at one point during the lesson and smiled slightly, a private acknowledgement of lessons learned both from history and from living through it. After class, Jasmine caught up with him in the hallway. They'd been slowly rebuilding their friendship, learning to navigate the complicated space between gratitude and resentment, between forgiveness and accountability. "Hey," she said, "you got a minute?" They found an empty classroom, sat on desks facing each other. "What's up?" Marcus asked. "I've been thinking about what you said at the press conference about choosing between following rules and doing what's right." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I was angry at you for a long time. Part of me still is, but I've been in therapy, working through everything, and my therapist asked me something. If I could go back, knowing everything I know now, would I want you to stay silent? Would I want things to continue the way they were?" "What did you say?" Marcus asked quietly. "I said no." Jasmine's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I wouldn't want that, because as much as this hurt, as much as having my trauma made public was violating, it's also over now. Riley can't hurt anyone else. Vance can't cover up anymore. The school actually has systems in place to protect kids. So yeah, I'm still angry about your methods, but I'm grateful for the results. And I wanted you to know that. Before you graduate, before we all move on, I wanted you to know that what you did mattered." They sat in silence for a moment, and Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not resolution exactly, because some things couldn't be resolved. Not forgiveness, because some things couldn't be forgiven. Just peace, the acceptance of complexity, of simultaneous truths, of the messy reality that people can be both grateful and hurt, that actions can be both right and wrong, that justice can feel both triumphant and hollow. "Thank you," he said finally, "for telling me that." "Thank you," she replied, "for not giving up, even when everyone told you to stop talking." That evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, laptop open, working on college applications for scholarships. His phone buzzed with a text from Ellen Rodriguez. "Saw the news about Riley's arraignment. Trial set for August. You'll probably have to testify. You ready for that?" He typed back, "Ready as I'll ever be." Another text, this time from Tyler. "Group chat. All 7 of us plus you. We're planning to meet monthly through senior year. Make sure nobody falls through cracks. You in?" "Definitely in," Marcus replied. His mother came home from her shift looking exhausted but smiling when she saw him at the table. "Working hard?" "Trying to," he said. She kissed the top of his head, a gesture from childhood that he usually found embarrassing but tonight accepted. "I'm proud of you, you know. Every day I'm proud of you." "Even though I destroyed the football season?" he asked, only half joking. "Especially because you destroyed the football season," she said firmly. "If a football season matters more than children's safety, then it deserves to be destroyed." After she went to shower, Marcus returned to his applications. To the question that appeared on everyone, describe a time when you challenged something you believed was unjust. What was the outcome, and what did you learn? He stared at the blank text box for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened, everything he'd learned. Then he began to type. "I learned that justice isn't clean. It's not triumphant music and heroic moments. It's complicated and painful, and it hurts everyone involved, including the person trying to do right. I learned that speaking truth doesn't guarantee you'll be believed, and being believed doesn't guarantee things will change. I learned that you can do everything right and still cause harm, and you can break rules and still serve justice. But most importantly, I learned that silence is also a choice, and sometimes the cost of speaking up is lower than the cost of staying quiet. even when it doesn't feel that way in the moment. Sometimes you have to choose between being comfortable and being truthful, and the only way to live with yourself is to choose truth, regardless of the consequences. He wrote for 2 hours, the words flowing in a way they hadn't before, and when he finally finished, he read it back and knew it was honest. Not perfect, not triumphant, just honest. And maybe that was enough. Outside his window, Chicago moved through its evening rhythms. Trains rattling past, sirens in the distance, the city's constant noise. Lincoln High would open its doors again tomorrow, and he'd walk through them. And life would continue its messy, complicated forward motion. There would be more challenges ahead, more injustices to confront, more impossible choices between right action and easy compliance. But tonight, Marcus Chen was 16 years old, sitting at his kitchen table in a small apartment on Chicago's west side, and he knew something that not everyone learns. That one person, even a powerless one, even a kid, can look at a broken system and refuse to accept it, can choose to speak when everyone says to stay silent, can risk everything for the possibility of change. And sometimes, just sometimes, that choice matters. The end.